2, 1. Welcome to The Sounding. We aim to provide sexual trauma survivors with a path to healing in order to tell their stories. We always like to start with a little disclaimer. We are not doctors, lawyers, therapists. We're just two people who are having conversations about things that we care about. So thank you for being here.
Yes. So today, I was driving the other day and I heard this song that was talking about childhood memories, and I think it was called like When We Were Young, and it was like talking about how easy life was when we were young and how they would love to go back to that. And I thought to myself, like, I don't recall that experience. Like, I did not have a childhood that I wanted to sing about. I was terrified a lot of my childhood, and as a result, not only was I terrified, but I enjoyed terrifying things. And so we just started talking about, well, I sent it to Shay, and I said, we should talk about this. And she said, it reminds me of a class that I'm taking right now. So before I let her get into that, I forgot the part about liking, subscribing, sharing, all that good things to support us, because it does really make a big difference. So with that said, Shay is working on her master's and is taking some very interesting classes right now.
Yeah, so I'm actually taking a class called the Trauma and the Impact on Student Cognition. And while it is definitely all catered towards this idea of being a teacher in the classroom with students, it's applicable, however you want to say that word, to everyone.
Right.
Because every single person goes through one trauma, at least in their life, and we are all navigating stress, and we are all navigating oftentimes toxic stress.
Right, which is the point of us being here. However, like, as community, we could do better.
Well, and it's important that we understand that trauma and toxic stress impact cognition.
Yes.
Like, trauma is not something that happened. It happens to the body.
Yes.
And then there's repercussions that...
Well, yeah, and we've talked about this before, that it fragments, and so you have loss of memory. And often when you meet people that say, I don't really remember my childhood, that is a clear indicator that something traumatic has happened. And I think that that's very telling, that in order to survive trauma, you almost have to forget about it. And so, when people sing about a joyful childhood, some of us are like, I don't even remember my childhood. And the things that I remember certainly don't make me want to sing about them. So I think we just need to be more conscious of that as a society, as a community, that when you're impacted negatively in childhood because of trauma, which it's happening more and more, that it impairs you in a lot of ways, just even in the classroom. And
well, yeah, I mean, it totally impairs you in the classroom. You're expecting a child who's in fight or flight, survival mode 24/7, to be in a growth mindset. It's just not accessible. They have no access to their prefrontal cortex. And something that sticks out to me in that class, and again, it applies to adults too. Think about when we're in stressful situations and someone's like, well, say something.
Yeah.
We cannot access our prefrontal cortex. We don't have the words. We don't have the capacity to respond. So we're yelling at kids, use your words. We're telling adults, say something. And our bodies are reacting, right? For survival. And the memory loss is, the body does that for survival.
Sure.
If you were to have the full-on memory be present, it can be too much. That's why it fragments it off into pieces, and that's why the court systems need to do a better job of understanding how trauma impacts cognition, especially when they're asking people to tell your story about this trauma, and the story sounds weird and it comes in pieces, and then people like the defense team can pick it apart and confuse the jury, when really this is natural.
It is very natural.
It's a natural response.
And I think, even...
It's an intelligent response.
And even, like, let's say, looping and how that could affect being on the stand even as a victim, that when you loop, really aren't present. I mean, I spent a lot of my life looping, meaning, like, Shay could be sitting here talking to me and I'm not hearing what the hell she's saying because I'm thinking about some awful thing that I did or said, or I'm trying to think about what I'm going to say next to Shay to get her to understand me better. And so it really is difficult to be present on so many levels after you've had trauma. So even just sitting in a classroom, and maybe that's why on Charlie Brown it was a wah, 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 because that is, for me, that's what school felt like. I did not know what was going on or hear what was going on. I was full out traumatized as a child.
Well, and then what happens is the teacher sees children like you or children who are rowdy, and then they make their guess at what they think it is, and then these kids get put on IEPs, and then they get taken to doctors. Doctors misdiagnose them because doctors aren't trained in how to ask about trauma.
Right.
And therefore the root never gets exposed as to why this child is bouncing around the room, having outbursts, or is isolating themselves. And then when you have misdiagnosis, you have mistreatment.
Yes.
Your treatment plans are wrong, so you're on wrong medication. Oftentimes,
or maybe
it's
not
PTSD.
even needing to be on medication
That's
at
what I'm
all.
saying.
Right.
That's why you're on wrong medication.
Yeah.
Because your medication maybe isn't prescription, maybe it's meditation and yoga and tapping and group therapy, art therapy, nature, sports.
I mean, children certainly aren't supposed to be in a classroom 8 hours a day. That's insane. We are set up in this society to become little robots and slaves to the industry that's fed by the pharmaceuticals. And if somebody said to me the other day, and then I'll stop going off on a tangent, that like it's called the Food and Drug Administration because the food leads you to the drugs, i.e. the pharmaceuticals. And I'm like, oh, that is so true. Like, we live in a, and even something simple as the lights that are in the classrooms. Like, you cannot rest when you have those fluorescent bulbs. Some people, they drive them nuts and they're exhausted, and then they come home with homework, and it's like, life in general is supposed to be enjoyed. Our children are not enjoying it, and then you take a child that's traumatized, which I can't even imagine what the numbers are anymore for traumatized children.
It's I think like 3 million.
I mean,
or maybe I'm thinking of suspensions.
Yeah, but
it's a lot.
The percentage has got to be way up there.
It's 7.
So you've got a high percentage of people that are traumatized these days, and then we live in a society where we still aren't talking about it. It's getting better.
It is getting better,
but not really.
It's a slow process. I think what I'm learning too in this class is they're trying to figure out, at least in the school portion, which is a big deal because our little people are our future, right? And so now they're saying, okay, we need to integrate social emotional learning skills, right? What they're finding is that when you're wanting to have higher achievement in grades, retention, attendance, showing up, belonging, all of those things that you want to score well in, well, when you have youth and students and teachers who have social emotional regulation skills, you're going to see the higher achievement. But then the teachers are already swamped with this huge curriculum that they have to get these kids to do well on these state tests to get the funding. Now they're proposing that teachers are being held accountable for incorporating social emotional learning skills so that they can then, and teachers are like, whoa.
It's too much.
it's like, how are you going to
Right.
expect me to do all of these
Yes,
things?
it's too much. Well, and I mean, I think that that's kind of how it is in this society, right? Is it's too much. It's too much for the police to police and also be therapists and also handle traumatic situations. It's too much for teachers to have to pay for the things
It's
in
too
their
much
classroom.
for people
and
to work 40 hours
it
a week at
is.
corporate America.
And we don't have mothers and fathers in the home the way that we did.
Right.
So, I mean, we got to break down the system, people. And if you're paying attention, then good for you. And if you're not, it's time to wake up. I mean, it really is. We are traumatized by our own society over and over again. And the systems put in place to help further traumatize us, like pharmaceuticals. Now we're taking them for everything, and then your body is hurting, and then the education system is broken. Like, it's time to wake up, people. That's all there is to it. It is. It's time to wake up and really start observing people and paying attention. Like, a lot of people are acting from a traumatized place, and we're expecting them to behave like we do because we've done the work.
And not even just traumatized, from a current state of like fight or flight.
Yes.
You know, like a current state of like, I'm in survival mode.
Right.
And imagine what that feels like. It's a
Or,
right?
yeah, I don't have to. I mean, I think we both know what it
No.
feels like. But for those that don't, or how about this? How about people are walking around like pharmaceuticals zombies because they're taking so many pills?
Well, because it's either this,
Right.
or
it's nothing. And so there has to be an in-between, right? So, you know.
Which leads me to one of the main takeaways that I want people to take from this conversation is what I'm learning. And it just is an interesting thing. It was this week. It was, you know how you hear something a million times,
Yes.
and then somebody says it a different way, and you're like, whoa,
Right.
it landed.
Oh, yes.
So this week it landed. I'm a certified mindfulness teacher, right? I've learned a lot about emotional awareness. I've worked with youth for over 20 years. I know a lot about emotional regulation, the words, right? But the way it was worded this week was as simply as, you cannot expect children to emotionally regulate themselves, or anyone, if they don't have emotional awareness.
Right.
But what that means is that is where you insert these somatic experiencing practices where you're meditating and finding the emotion in the body, noticing how it feels, like excitement. Oh, I feel butterflies. It feels like butterflies swirling. I feel open. It feels like ease.
Yeah.
All of these ways to describe the emotion.
Right.
Same thing with anger. If you're expecting a child to calm down from being angry, they have to understand that they're angry.
Right. Absolutely.
They have to connect.
And
to
yelling
that
at a
and feel
child
it.
to stop yelling doesn't make any sense. Or
So
would-
insert
yeah.
co-regulation.
Oh, right.
We are
We
to
have to
co-regulate.
Yes.
As the adults, but then even an adult in an adult situation.
In society,
You must co-regulate
yes.
with each other.
Let's all be responsible
It's
for our
called
own
mirror
regulation,
neurons.
right?
So if Dina were to be yelling at me, my mirror neurons are gonna immediately want to do that back. But if I have that pause and I'm able to take a breath and realize, oh, Dina is upset, let me listen and then move from a space of, okay, I think this is what I'm hearing you say. We will have a much more meaningful conversation and probably find resolve, as opposed to me not co-regulating.
Yeah.
You know?
And I think it's part of the self-awareness. It's part of coming from a place, which I think we're going to talk about in more detail, but observing and not reacting, because we are all reacting a lot. And I know that I no longer am in a reactionary state because I've spent a lot of time healing myself. So now I can have somebody yell at me and I don't react in a yelling way. And because I understand that a lot of the times that doesn't have anything to do with me. It has to do with them. And I can hold space for somebody that's upset now in a way that I couldn't before. And I find that when I see that happen, or when I'm able to be in that situation, that generally things work out a lot nicer and calmer, and people need to be heard, you know?
But do you feel yourself in those situations? Are you able to regulate yourself? Do you feel your mirror neurons wanting to go and elevate, and then you work it down? Because that's what I think I'm trying to get the takeaway is.
I mean,
we have to.
Sure. I think here's the thing. And
like, it is a practice.
Yes. It took me a long time to get to here, right? To get to a place where I can have somebody be upset and I don't mirror that. And it's not, and when it first started happening, it happened with a lot of people that had known me a long time and didn't
they weren't ready
for that. And so, like, I had people call me crazy.
Mm-hmm.
I had one time my friend's husband started chasing me down the street and calling me crazy because I wouldn't argue with him and we had a differing point of view. And, you know, I was told, just because you're not yelling doesn't make you better. And I'm like, it's not that it makes me better. It makes me more present. It makes me able to hold space for someone else. Like, anger and yelling and frustration comes from an unhealed place. And so I'm not ashamed of my healing, and that I don't need to be angry anymore to be heard, because I have regulated. I have made a safe space for my inner child, so I don't have to have. And I'm not saying that anger comes from tantrums. I'm not saying that, but
I hear what you're saying.
You know, I don't need to engage at that level. I can hold space for somebody.
That's the part I like. I like how you're saying that when we become emotionally aware, we're aware of our emotions, we're able to then regulate them. Well, why? Well, because we genuinely want to be present for this conversation.
I want to be able to hear, like, that other person's sadness or anger and hold space and be able to help them. And I think in the beginning, people thought it was coming from, like, an arrogant, like, I'm better, look, I don't have to get mad. And it's like, no, I am more healed and I'm present and I'm able to hug or listen.
Like, I'm actively listening.
Right. Like, and I'm proud of that, because there was a time where I was a road rager, yelling at people in the movie theater. Like, girl, I was insane. So now, when somebody's yelling, and oftentimes people yell at you in a mean way or in a hurtful way, but you don't have to take it.
Right.
That's the thing. Like, you have to get to a place where you have almost like Teflon, or like, I like to say, like the Wonder Woman, like, no, I deflect, like, but I also can hold space. I just don't have to get emotionally charged, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So I think the trauma, we need to first understand it and talk about it and observe it and know that it's all of our responsibility to help each other.
It is, and I think a lot of changes need to be made in our education system, in our healthcare system.
Well, we can't trust our government anymore. I mean, let's be honest. and that's part of why people get angry with me, is because I do say things that are that. But listen, we have to be responsible for our own houses, for our own behaviors, and start holding people's feet to the fire, because it's not good enough. Our education system's not good enough. Our medical system is not good enough. Our food industry, it's not good enough.
Well, and our community resources. I mean, this is the reason why we are having the traumatized kids who go to school, just in regards to student cognition, right, is that stuff is happening outside of the school.
Yeah, absolutely.
And why is it happening? Well, because people are stressed to the max. They're surviving.
Yes.
People are in survival mode.
And they can't afford good, healthy foods, and they're overly medicated, and they're exhausted. And then there are people at the top that are just sucking everybody dry. And
then add in addictions to help numb the pains.
And they've taught us all to judge each other. Like, judgment is such an awful place to come from. Like, listen, I love all people, and in the sense that we're all one. as ridiculous as people think that sounds, it's true. We're all one energy field. And
Happy belated birthday, Bob Marley, the other week.
I love that. So we all have to love each other. And when you're standing in judgment of somebody else, usually it's judgment of yourself, right? And so that's just the reality of it. I know that I used to be very judgmental, and I didn't like myself very much. And the less judgmental I get, the more I love myself. And it's interesting to watch that happen. Like, oh, my judgment of other people has always been about me. Mm-hmm. Always. Mm-hmm. And when you get out of everybody else's business and you just worry about you, be selfish. Maybe that's a new word. But be selfish and really like pour into yourself, and not in a way that you're impacting other people negatively, but damn it, love yourself, and then you will learn to love others. That's just the way it works.
Yeah.
And for all those people that called me crazy and, you know, told me I was stupid because I had a different belief system, like, I don't care. Do your work. You sound like a big baby. Like, seriously. It's ridiculous when men are yelling at women about that kind of stuff. And that's the other thing. Like, men, stop being emasculated. Us women, we're tired out here. We're not supposed to be taking on all this extra work. So if we could get our men back in a strong role so women can create and nurture and love, like, I would enjoy that too.
Look. I just feel like if you're gonna carry the role of a masculine role, then do it.
Then
carry
do
that
it.
weight.
Right.
And if you're gonna be feminine, then represent.
Right.
But if you are going to also be somebody who is wanting to be the masculine in a masculine and feminine relationship, well, then you need to carry that weight,
right,
sir.
Yes, exactly. So we got a breakdown in society, people.
That's a whole other video.
Right. And a lot of it comes from trauma. So let's really...
And the impact on cognition is just, it's real. This video, I mean, that's the main point of this video, is just to become aware that trauma impacts our ability to think clearly. And we definitely aren't in a growth mindset when we are in survival mode. So you also can't expect yourself to get into this thriving mode if you're still in survival mode, which is what my therapist mentioned to me, and the way she said it, I was like, oh, that makes sense. She's like, yeah, you're in survival mode. How can you expect to be thriving when you're still operating in these patterns that are for your survival mode?
And I think we talked about that a lot when you were still in your case, and our case and my end was over, and that I would say to you, like, you're being so hard on yourself because you're expecting some kind of healing to happen in the midst of the storm. And like, right now it's enough for you to just be getting through the storm and knowing that different sort of healing will happen on the other end of it, because it is hard to be surviving and thriving, and you did one hell of a job, as did I. But also, you have to give yourself, you know, some grace and understand that, you know, you can't heal an environment that's, you know, that's made you sick either. So,
well, and in regards to the trial, it's toxic stress in the moment.
Yeah, absolutely.
You
can't, and that's up and down. Like, you never know from one day to the next what might happen. So. Yeah, so I think, you know, the healing practice was going to be the pigeon pose, which we can't really get into. So look that one up, because trauma is stored in the hips a lot. And, you know, it's fascinating because I think we all know people that are getting hip surgery left and right. So trauma gets stored in the hips. So, you know.
What you trying to say, that BBLs is not worth it? Are they healing or no?
I don't know.
You know what I mean? Maybe people
they are.
cut out the trauma. I don't know.
Well, I was
or they're
just
adding to
about,
it. I don't know.
I'm talking about hip replacements in general more so. But I mean, either way, right? Who knows? Maybe there's a study there. But
in yoga, we talk about how in the shoulders we carry our everyday stressors. So that this is where we want to, like, you know, relax when we're feeling the weight of like work and like home life. But when you are really trying to heal unresolved, like, deep wounds, even maybe generational DNA trauma, you open up your hips. And
Right.
so pigeon pose, you can do it reclined, you can lay on your back and do it. You can do it in the full version. You can do it in your bed.
But look them up, hip opening positions for sure. They help. I know I just did a sound healing the other day. It was 2.5 hours long, and we held each pose for 45 minutes, and there were only 3 poses.
Nice.
And it was amazing. And there was a lot that you could just feel releasing from the body. So just because you have trauma doesn't mean it has to stay there forever. I mean, we are both advocates for energetic clearing, and I live a totally different life than I once did. So all I can say is I know it works because I don't suffer anymore.
Yeah. And just try what works for you. And the only way you'll know is by trying. And if you are hoping to thrive, you have to become aware of your survival patterns in order to access higher thinking and executing
you
those
gotta
goals.
feel it to heal it, people.
Literally, I wrote that on my notes.
Right,
I did.
right.
Feel to heal, really.
It is very true. And the only way to is through.
Yeah.
So you got to do the work. And we're here for you.
Yes.
So like, subscribe, comment. Please reach out to us if you have questions or you want to hear us talk about anything. We are very excited about watching the momentum of this community grow, because we know the work that we're doing is very important, because when survivors speak,
the silence ends.
thank you.
Thank you.
Love and light. Namaste.
Like, how long do I wait?
Right.